So Urban Meyer spoke with Albert Breer about Joe Burrow, and I know that we're all getting Joe Burrow fatigue, but that's part of the NFL draft process. You go from not knowing much about this dude at the start of September to knowing his favorite color, to knowing what school he went to in elementary, to knowing what people said about him in high school, to his recruiting process. But there's still things to unpack, and there's still ways to look at this as we talk about what we believe is going to be the number one pick in the NFL draft next week. Now, couple things, right? Going into Urban Meyer that I wanted to outline about Joe Burrow. So Burrow has been making headlines being compared to Joe Montana by Joel Klatt, being compared to Tom Brady by others, and LeBron James to others. And he said things like, I've never had a losing season in my entire life, which ain't really as hard as it seems to be, because usually the best players play on the best teams in Little League, and that's why they all son everybody, because they all just play together and they stay together all the way up through high school. Same thing with your AAU team. You're usually pretty doggone good, okay? Then you get to high school, it's a little bit more difficult. You get to college, depending on where you go to school, not only may you not have a season where you don't lose, in the case of one Joe Burrow, you'll have seasons or careers where you don't see double-digit losses. You just don't. And if you win the Heisman Trophy, like Joe Burrow, they rename the high school stadium in Athens after you. So he goes on radio in LSU to answer the question what his favorite play is, and I'm going to read this because I don't want to screw it up. It's called Giant, right? And in this formation, you have Jamar Chase at the X position. He runs an over or a post route. Justin Jefferson at the F runs an over route. And then you get a deep dig from Terrace Marshall at the Z. Then you Clyde Edwards-Helaire into the flat. And then Thad Moss tight end going into the boundary at the flat. Okay? And there's reads through all of this. And the reason that he loves it is because you can't defend everybody. If you're got the free safety taking away the post, then he'll go from the post over to the nickel. If the nickel is running with the over, that leaves open the window for the dig. If the Mike gets under the dig, then somebody might be back in the flat, or he might get back to the flat, or the Will tracks back and gets into that window. Then you got Thad Moss in the boundary. There's an option for him to go somewhere. And even if you manage to cover Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Terrace Marshall, Joe Burrow will pull it and take off, which is exactly what he would end up doing against Clemson. He sees the field very well. He understands the offense very well. And he's able to put the ball where it's supposed to go. And he's good enough with his legs to make things happen when he needs to. He's not going to be a statue back there. Lots of things to like about Joe Burrow, right? Urban Meyer didn't always see that. And one of my favorite stories about Joe Burrow, and one of the things that actually makes Tom Herman look good, is a story that Urban Meyer told on himself when they signed Joe Burrow. Okay? He said, Tom called me up and he said, I'm going to FaceTime you. And he FaceTimed him. And he showed in the FaceTime camera on his iPhone, Joe Burrow throwing passes. And then he said into the phone, I've found your next Alex Smith. For those of you that don't remember, Alex Smith played for Urban Meyer at Utah, right? Was really good. And had a pretty good NFL career, all things considered. And Urban Meyer didn't immediately believe him. Urban Meyer said, why don't you keep looking around? Why don't you go try to find me another quarterback? And they kept looking around, and Tom kept going, this is the guy. This is the guy we want. This is the guy we need. You get Joe Burrow coming in there. He breaks his hand. He falls down the depth chart. Ends up going into a duel with Dwayne Haskins. Probably figures out he's going to lose that duel to Dwayne Haskins based on how spring practice goes. And goes into the transfer portal as a grad transfer. Gets a call from Ed Orgeron, who says, I'm going to buy you some crawfish at the place that doesn't serve crawfish. They make the dude go out and get the crawfish. Comes back. And then we get Joe Burrow at LSU, for which they won 10 games, and they beat a really good Central Florida team. But nobody saw last year coming. And that's the knock, right? The knock is going to be he had one really great season, and he took a tremendous leap forward, going from completing like less than 60% of his passes to going to like 78%, right? Just an enormous jump. Nearly, not nearly, 5,600 yards passing, 60 passing touchdowns, 6 interceptions, right? Auburn played them the closest as anybody, right? And they basically ran roughshod over everybody else. People forget the same Jordan Love who was going up against Joe Burrow is the same one that people are talking about being maybe the 4th quarterback drafted. And we'll get to that because some of the prop bets around this stuff is really interesting. But I say this to say, if Urban Meyer can miss on a quarterback, even after he's seen him being live streamed by his offensive coordinator who says, hey, I think this dude is probably one of the best quarterbacks that you've ever coached, or like one of the best quarterbacks that you've ever coached, maybe we can all miss. And it's not as if this pandemic has changed that. If anything, it's made it even more fuzzy. Because normally, even as you get a normal year, and you have not just the scouting combine, but pro days for everybody to go through, still miss. You still got Josh Rosen being taken above Lamar Jackson. And you still got Lamar Jackson being unanimous MVP, and Josh Rosen can't start for 2 different NFL franchises, as he was called the most pro-ready quarterback in that draft, from his size to his skills to his technique. I like Joe Burrow in college. I liked him at LSU. He also had a tremendous wide receiving core and a tremendous offensive line and an okay defense. I'm not prepared to say that the man can show up to Cincinnati and turn him around. And I say that because I was mesmerized watching Andy Dalton yesterday on the Twitters, okay? Andy Dalton did the most impressive thing I've ever seen him do with a football. And I saw him at Texas Christian, and I've seen enough of him in Cincinnati. The man was basically throwing 20-yard darts into a hole in a net that was about a foot by a foot wide. It's a square, about a foot. Had his children tossing him footballs and putting them through drills, and it was supposed to be a cute pic, right? Or a cute video. But what it was Andy Dalton throwing darts. Just one after the other. Accuracy like I'd never seen from Andy Dalton before. And quite frankly, not used to seeing that kind of accuracy from every quarterback, and that's where we get to remind everybody and remind ourselves. Even the guys we think are mediocre and suck in the NFL are still really, really, really good at their jobs. But Andy Dalton also wasn't so good that he could flip Cincinnati into the kind of team that competes for championships. Not happening. And do we think that Joe Burrow is really that much better than Andy Dalton throwing darts? Apparently, because we all slot him as the number 1 pick who's going to be taken, even as I'm going, maybe not. Or as Mayberry and I have pointed out, maybe you want to take Isaiah Simmons or even Chase Young because it's a bit safer. Or Tristan Wirfs, who I think is probably going to be the best player in this draft class when things are said and done, even as Chase Young was the best player in college football last year. So it's lots of conjecture, it's lots of projection, and as much as I know there are people that love the draft and they love to mock stuff up and they love to play GM, I'm just not one of them. I'll talk about it. It can be fun, but for the most part, it's really just getting on my damn nerves because nobody knows nothing, even the people who are paid to know something, because they just don't have the data or the analysis to show this pick will work. Nobody in the NFL, no owner, no scout, no coach is prepared to bet his entire fortune on one pick in the NFL draft, which goes to show you just how difficult it is to say Joe Burrow is going to be an all-pro quarterback, because that's what I would need to be drafted number 1. I don't want to draft a perennial Pro Bowler. I want to draft an all-pro. I don't want to draft a dude that's going to be a starter for me in every game. I want to draft an all-pro. I want to draft the best doggone player in the NFL. That's the point of this thing. The point is not necessarily to get the best you can get. The point is with every single pick that you make to try to get the guy who's going to make an all-pro team. And we have data to show you can draft that guy in the 6th round. You can draft that guy in the 5th round. You can draft that guy with the first overall pick. Matter of fact, we've seen it. Cam Newton was really good. Not any good anymore. Or at least not as good as he should be. Meanwhile, Tom Brady is the one everybody wants to point to. 199th overall in the draft. 6th round. Greatest of all time. It works for some. It doesn't work for others. Who would have told you that Khalil Mack, coming out of Buffalo as a linebacker, was going to be one of the best edge men in the entire league? Or that Aaron Donald, coming out of Pittsburgh, was going to be one of the most dynamic defensive tackles in the history of the game? Nobody. Like the last conventional dude to work out, Nick Bosa. And he might be the 3rd best pass rusher coming out of Ohio State in the last 3 years. He's also went to Ohio State. But he didn't have that awesome high school career. He was good. He was real good. But he wasn't the kind of dude putting up 10,000 yards in 3 years. He didn't have 60 sacks in a season, for which there are guys that have done that. I'm just saying, as we talk about Joe Burrow, as we talk about the NFL draft, as everybody and their mom tries to throw out today and tomorrow who's going to be taken by whom and where, even we're seeing mock drafts with trades, which is ludicrous at this point. Nobody knows nothing. That's also what makes it fun sometimes, but I would prefer to know something, right? I would prefer to know the stories. I would prefer to see why it is you guys end up making this decision and how many of y'all are willing to bet the farm on it. Because the stakes make it worthwhile. When you can put together an NFL mock draft where we don't have stakes for you being wrong, you got no skin in the game. I want to see some skin in the game.